Katu Veo wastelanders, my name is Fisher and welcome to the Lost Holotapes channel, where we as always analyze the lore of the Fallout universe, digging ourselves deep in the history of settlements and factions. Today we will start talking about the Capital Wasteland, the territory of the pre-war city of Washington and its surroundings presented to us in Fallout 3. The Capital Wasteland is a kind of sacred place for me personally, because Fallout 3 was the first game of the series that I played back in 2008 and which left a mark somewhere close to my heart. The scene of the escape from Vault 101, in which the protagonist gets momentarily blinded by sunlight and, having regained his sight, examines a wondrous new world and a flying iPod broadcasting John Henry Eden's transmission, has become the most romantic in the original meaning of the world moment for many years. To be honest, for some reason returning to Fallout 3 now was a very strange experiment for me. It was like exhuming a corpse. I don't know, maybe because New Vegas has eclipsed it with introduction of new mechanics, gameplay variation and increased number of assets. Or maybe because for the same reason Fallout 3 is not of interest for modders and therefore morally has long since died. Or maybe it's just because some things are better left as pleasant nostalgic memories. The last point is quite relevant because now, on the sober head of an amateur historian, I was not very enthusiastic about the quality of the lore. There are several very critical problems at the conceptual level, such as the reproduction of Little Lamplight or the uncertainty of the death of Vault 106 and 108. Of course, this blurs a pleasant nostalgic picture. However, the prime storyline of the confrontation between the Enclave and the Brotherhood of Steel, its depth, pacing, the development of the conflict as I believe, turned out even stronger than the main quest of New Vegas, in which there were absolutely no dramatic swings during the war between NCR and the Legion, and as a result it looked like the battle of Goliath and David. Nevertheless, Fallout 3 plays a crucial role for the series, being the first long-awaited labeled release after the bankruptcy of Interplay, the purchase of the series by Bethesda, and several games that failed or were not released at all. The success or failure of Fallout 3 determined the fate of the series, and Bethesda didn't let us down. But we are here to explore the history of the in-game events. With this, I propose to finish with the introductory briefing, get into the vertibird and head on to the safari of the Capital Wasteland. The Capital Wasteland, as already mentioned, is the territory of the city of Washington and its surroundings. The wasteland occupies partial territories of 3 states, Maryland, Virginia and the District of Columbia. The wasteland extends beyond the plain area itself and extends south to the Calvert and St. Mary peninsulas. The border of the Capital and Appalachian wastelands will pass through the Raven Rock Mountains. 2 main rivers pass through the wasteland, the Potomac and the Anacostia. The wasteland can be conditionally divided into several subregions. Northern Wastes, the northern bank of the Potomac, the territory of the state of Maryland. Southern Wastes, the south bank of the Potomac, the territory of the state of Virginia. St. Mary and Calvert, the territories of the peninsulas of the same names. Point Lookout, swampy national park at the southernmost point of the St. Mary's Peninsula, overlooking the Chesapeake Bay. We traditionally begin the analysis of the history of the wasteland with an inspection of vaults and shelters. There were 6 Vault-Tec vaults in the region. Vault 87, the FIAV virus testing center. The subjects were of course residents of the vault. Vault 92, the vault was supposed to be sealed for 100 years and 245 outstanding musicians of the nation were gathered in it. Trumpeters and pipers, violinists and bassists, all whose ears have not been stepped on by Yao Gai. The experiment at the vault was appropriate, testing the effect of white noise. Vault 101, near the pre-war town of Springwell. The experiment of the vault was the dictatorship of the overseer and complete isolation. According to the idea, it should never have opened and lasted as long as it could. Therefore, it was provided with everything necessary for a long autonomous existence. Vault 106, in the vault which was supposed to function for only 12 years and 3 months, the effect of psychotropic substances added to food, water and ventilation was investigated. In total, 95 subjects and 12 scientists were settled in the vault. Vault 108, the capacity of the vault was 475 people, and it was supposed to be locked up for 38 years. The essence of the experiment is the absence of any prior appointment for employees and residents. All positions in the vault had to be personally determined by the first overseer, who at the same time has cancer and will have to die in 3 years. In addition to this, the main generator was supposed to stall after 20 years, and the backup generator was supposed to provide only half of the vault with energy. Plus, there were 3 times as many weapons in the vault, and there was no entertainment. In addition, experiments on cloning people were carried out. In general, it was a complete hodgepodge of experiments. Vault 112. 2 years before the war, in 2075, 85 residents of the vault were placed in hibernation capsules and loaded into the virtual reality world, which was controlled by the overseer and creator of the GEC, Stanislaus Brown. Not everyone was lucky enough to get a place in the vault. Most of the people have to hide from the explosions wherever they have to. 4 families have taken refuge in the basements of the city of Annandale. A refuge assistance center was organized in the Germantown Police Department. The camp is managed by the National Catastrophe Relief Auxiliary. Somewhere in the region, Colonel Ellen Santiago's squad survives the war. The Naval Research Institute also survives. It is a pre-war research institute engaged, as the name implies, in marine, civil and military technologies and research. Office employees are waiting out the war in Dunwich building. There was a Mama Dolce restaurant in Arlington, which, like its counterpart in Appalachia, was a cover for the guerrillas of the Chinese People's Army. According to indirect signs, the Chinese are also holed up in the Taft Tunnel, connecting the Jefferson Memorial and the Pentagon. The Hamilton family, having not received a place in the vault, made their own in the caves of Virginia. At the risk of being court-martialed, one of the Keller family members, a military man, sent parts of the code to his family members so that they together, united and ending intra-family conflicts, evacuated to the National Guard bunker. Unfortunately, the Kellers hated each other so much that some gave up their parts of the code and preferred to die outside rather than evacuate with the family. 82 school children and several teachers were on an excursion to the Lamplight Cavern. They met the war. There were many bunkers in the wasteland under the guise of sewage. Therefore, the Understein family took refuge in the Oscar Zulu bunker and some other refugees in the Sierra Victor and Yankee Bravo bunkers. One of the bunkers, Sierra Romero, was used by Chinese spies. There was a Turtle Dove detention camp in Point Lookout for Chinese spies and honest immigrants suspected of having ties and assistance to the Chinese Communist Party, just like in the 40s for the Japanese. Before the war, some of the prisoners tried to escape through a sewer tunnel from the morgue. Also in the swampy region, there was a medical underground research institute complex, St. Aubin, which was engaged in the research of technologies for extracting brains from human bodies for use in robo-brains and brain banks, the creation of biomedical gel and other research related to brains, and which can be used for military purposes. The complex was located under the Lookout Lighthouse. Considering that, the staff of the center argued about the years that the laboratory could withstand after the war. Most likely the center was active during the war. Now let's talk about the history itself. 2077. Some kind of super toxic bomb fell right in front of Vault 87, damaging the gear doors. The level of radiation pollution was unthinkable, 4,000 rad per sec. The vault has forever lost the opportunity to come to the surface. In Vault 101, the overseer, according to the directives of Vault Tech, informs everyone that there is nothing behind the doors except the scorched radioactive earth, and that they are almost the last survivors on the planet. As evidence, he puts on the air several fake radio broadcasts that convince the Vaulters that it is not worth even trying to leave the new Adobe. There were several military posts on the roads in the region, but they all died during the war. These were the Rickling Grove checkpoint, the Vault Billboard checkpoint, the Enlist Billboard checkpoint, and the Smith-Casey checkpoint. November the 2nd, psychotropic gas begins to be sprayed in Vault 106. At the end of the November, the last adult in the Lamplight Caverns went on the scout mission and didn't return. In December, children in Lamplight found a secret entrance to Vault 87 in the depths of the caves and began to ask for help. The tech worker on the other side told them to leave, thinking that the children were hallucinations of his dead son. The children got angry on the adults and decided that from now on, no adults should be in their settlement, and therefore when one of them reached the age of 18, he should be kicked out. I have a very huge concern about the concept of Lamplight as a settlement of children, since a logical question arises. How were they actually replenishing the population for 200 years? Well, of course, you can already start making new people at age of 14, despite the nastiness and extreme survival risks. There is of course an option that adults from Big Town carried their children back to Lamplight, or maybe wastelanders were bringing their unwanted babies for upbringing. People who survived in the wasteland are flooding to Germantown to the Refugee Aid Center. There were too many people and the Catastrophe Relief Auxiliary stopped coping with the load. NCRA began to lose control, looting started, supplies and medicine began to run out, the number of deaths increased, and even the National Guard that came to the aid for suppression couldn't cope with the crowd. As a result, desertions began even in NCRA, and eventually they dispersed and the camp fell. In addition to Germantown, people began to flock to the Museum of History because it was not badly damaged. The damaged office survivors were ghoulified. In the basement, ghouls find a Lovecraft monolith, and possessed they become followers of the cult of Uk-Qualtoth. After 2077, Professor Calvert, a member of the most influential family that controlled politics in the Point Lookout region and funded research at St. Aubin, became a brain in the jar and developed telepathic abilities. He wants to conquer the region mentally, whatever that means. Anyway, he knows how to control robots with the power of thought and can penetrate the minds of other people. There is a British intelligence agent in the region, Desmond Lockhart, who has turned into a ghoul and has a brainwave blocking device directed against Calvert. In general, these two have had a conflict since before the war, and after the war Desmond, during some confrontation, destroyed Calvert's body, as if he still needed it at all. As for St. Aubin, the construction of the center was leaking. Of course, since it was built in sandy soil below the waterline. What the architects were even thinking about? In any case, after 2077, the entire scientific staff of the center disappeared, and judging by the skeletal remains inside, the center staff was eliminated by Calvert's robots. 4 families of Annandale came to the surface and continued to live in the town, but one day they ran out of food. Then they turned to cannibalism, and being an isolated settlement hiding the terrible truth in their refrigerators, they were marrying each other for generations and eventually very soon became relatives at the genetic level. Cannibalism and incest, everything what we like. Subsequently, the difficult to pronounce name of the settlement was reduced simply to Andale. The mini bunkers Oscar Zulu, Sierra Romero and Sierra Victor are dying off, and Yankee Bravo is being feral ghoulified. The Tosseldorf camp is also dying and possibly being ghoulified. Some scroll piece of paper near some skeleton could help in understanding this story, but there is no of any. The Museum of History may not have been bombed, but it was not protected from radiation. Refugees are beginning to ghoulify. Ghoul settlers moved to the section of the museum dedicated to the pre-war exhibition Afterlife and established a ghoul settlement of Underworld. The Chinese also get ghoulified in Mama Dolce. Judging by the secondary signs of the existence of settlements such as mattresses, fortifications, piles of skeletons with weapons, kitchen and other area setups, we can say that there were settlements in Franklin Metro Station Utility and in the Dickerson Chapel. At the same time, considering the positions of the skeletons, in particular lying with weapons behind some coverings, most likely the settlements died in the defense from feral ghouls. The same fate awaits the Chinese Tough Tunnel. Although Pittsburgh is not part of the Capital Wasteland, its history will also be examined a little. After the war, anarchy ensues in the city and Pitt becomes a raider harbor and a large slave trade market. A group of people who survived the nuclear war gets out of their undefined shelter and moves to the north of the region to the hills, where they create a small settlement. Basically, the group consists of members of the same family. Over the years, the settlement will develop a very strange authoritarian regime in which there will be a permanent inheritance of the leader's position, the renaming of the settlement after a new leader, and the issuance of a bunch of fictional regalia. Let's just call it the Republic at the moment, because it is unknown who was its first ruler. In Point Lookout, the Hughes gang appears and dies off. The Audios Overseer of Vault 92 continues the experiment with the white noise, increasing the power of the signals. Residents are starting to go crazy and attack each other. The vault also suffers from leaks, being surrounded by groundwater. The professor, the main researcher of the experiment, tried to stop the overseer, but he was mad in his desire to carry out the plan. When 35 people had died already, the overseer ordered the professor to be killed if he continued to interfere. When half of the vault has already gone mad, the professor finds out that there was no control of the research, and the overseer was just stupidly broadcasting the white noise in the living quarters, constantly increasing the power and did not even record the results. As a result, the vault fell and it was partially flooded. In Point Lookout, local hillbillies called swamp folk, exposed to radiation and engaged in uncontrolled incest, mutate and become very aggressive towards genetically pure people. They worship some of their occult gods, in particular Uk-Qual-Tot, just like the ghouls in Dunwich. They sacrifice travelers to Uk-Qual-Tot, stabbing them on altars with ritual daggers and reading lines from the Book of the Kribbeknich. Although the swamp people conditionally live everywhere, but their permanent locations can be distinguished as Trapper's Shack, Grover's Shack and Ritual Site. The Keller family, or rather, those of its members who got to the National Guard bunker, is dying due to the constant radiation exposure due to the fact that the father of the family could not sit still and was constantly looking for an excuse to open the door and go outside. January 26 of 2078, children in the Lamplight Caverns choose the first leader among themselves and officially named the settlement Little Lamplight. The leader was the 10-year-old schoolboy Jason Grant, who de facto became the leader after the last adult left. Scientists create supermutants in the closed sector of the Vault 87, far from the eyes of the inhabitants. The Vault Security Service periodically abducted people and took them to the laboratory. In the end, there were too many supermutants and they break out of the prison. A massacre is taking place in the vault. Supermutants devour some of the inhabitants of the vault and dip some of them into the FIV vats, producing new supermutants. Among those who were dipped in FIV, there was the security guard Shelton Delacroix, who, having turned into a supermutant, did not lose his intelligence. From the point of view of private scientists, he thus became an ideal example of a super soldier, but from the point of view of supermutants, he was a complete failure. They put him in a cage and left him alive only to poke and bully. However, Shelton had a terminal in a room with encyclopedias, which he started reading out of boredom. Unfortunately, the mutation didn't pass without a trace. Shelton lost part of his memory and forgot who he was. In search of a new name, he stumbles upon an English November terrorist and takes his name, Fox. Supermutants for the next 200 years will hunt people in the wastelands, kidnap them and dip them in FIV. A group of people who came to the surface from their hiding place creates a settlement of Hilltop Farm. They built a farm, an irrigation system and had Brahmins. Every month there was a rotation of leadership. The Hamilton family makes their last entry in the terminal on December 28 of 2078. So after this date, already in 2079, they either leave their shelter or die in it. The very farm in which the leader changed every month, according to my calculations, died 16 months after its foundation at the hands of raiders in 2079 or 2080. In 2082, Colonel Santiago's military group leaves the wasteland to join an enclave in Appalachia. After 2084, since 10-year-old Jason Grant was the eldest in Lamplight, he is expelled from the settlement and probably established Big Town, a settlement of adults. Although perhaps it could be established by other generations of children in the future. The children from Lamplight thought that Big Town was cool in its own way, but in fact yesterday's children, unprepared for life in the wastelands, were constantly raided by slavers from Paradise Falls and supermutants to whom they could not fight back. 2101, January, the experiment of Vault 106 was supposed to end this month, but apparently it continued to exist and died much later. Before 2103, Edwin's gang, Hopkins hooligans and Sargento's gang are formed in the region. In 2103, Sargento's and Edwin's gangs moved to the newly repopulated Appalachia, and after 2103, Hopkins hooligans died off. Before 2115, in Vault 108, cloning was carried out, and each new clone turned out to be more aggressive than the previous one, and also with lost speech abilities. Clones named Gary were kept in a cell, and there were 54 of them in total. It's hard to say how often they were produced, once a year, once every 6 months, once every 3 years, but exactly before 2115 the Vault should have died either because of Gary's breakthrough or after the end of the work of the Vault's generators. But in this case, it is not at all clear why Gary's clones will still be alive in over 150 years. This question is sent to the same address as the question about the reproduction of Lamplight. 2127, the first overseer of Vault 101 dies. The new overseer continued the policy of isolation, transforming it into an ideology. We were born in the Vault, we will live in it, and we will die in it. On May 1st of 2134, the last record of the Mad Ghoul in Dunwich was left, so we can assume that by this time the settlement had died. Before 2177, the tribe formed from former US Army soldiers finds the isolated pre-war town of Richfield and establishes a settlement there. It is known that slavers from Paris Falls discover Richfield, attack and take everyone into slavery around 2210. Only one boy remained alive, who by the events of 2277 will turn into a crazy old man with a sniper rifle. Based on this, it can be concluded that Paris Falls, as a center of the slave trade on the site of the pre-war shopping center, was formed at least at the beginning of the 23rd century. June 10th of 2212. After 150 years spent in tropical and sky resorts, Board Stanislaus Brown, who is not amused even by the temporary deaths of his fellow vaultiers, activates a new simulation, Tranquility Lane, reminiscent of an ordinary pre-war American suburbia. 2237, the Naval Research Institute is looking for a new place to build a laboratory. Therefore, they find an aircraft carrier standing at the intersection of the Potomac and Anacostia rivers. Believing that an aircraft carrier is the best place they can find, they begin building a laboratory, simultaneously clearing the ship compartment by compartment from mile rooks. 2239, April 15th. On this day, the construction of the Rivet City settlement in the aircraft carrier was completed. It so happened that instead of laboratory, the result was a large residential city. It is very unclear what happened specifically to the Institute afterwards, since it was not mentioned anywhere else in the lore. If we agree that they left the office on the south bank of Anacostia to relocate completely to Rivet City, then we can conditionally assume that the faction has dissolved in the city. In any case, a council was organized in the settlement and to administer it. There is a social stratification of residents in the city, corresponding to the division into upper and lower decks. Rivet City Market has become one of the largest in the region. Not far from Vault 101 during the war, a bomb fell, creating a huge crater in the ground, but didn't explode. Around 2240, wastelanders took refuge in the crater from dust storms, who, according to the wiki, tried to get into Vault 101. Although, how is it even possible, given that 100 years have passed since the Great War? The Fodder remained in the crater even when the period of storms passed. They began to exchange the loot they found, began to trade with each other, and so this crater became a local trading hub, a place full of gatherings of Megans. Subsequently, parts of the fuselage began to be dragged from the airport for the construction of walls, and as a result the city of Megaton was formed. An unexploded bomb remained in the center of the city, and as a result a cult of Children of Atom appeared in the settlement, which prevented residents trying to remove the bomb. In general, it is indicated on the wiki that the city was built in 2241, but already in February of this same year there was a contact of the settlement with Vault 101, and this obviously doesn't match the chronology, so we will leave 2240 at least. The cult of the Children of Atom, which originated in the Megaton and worshipped the bomb, believed that it was necessary to absorb radiation, because in the center of each atom of living beings is the whole universe. The atom is God, the creator of worlds through nuclear reactions, and radiation is the dark matter of the creator. Therefore, when the cultists were irradiated, they believed that the atoms in their bodies were divided, releasing the universes enclosed in them. For them, death from radiation is considered sacred. They built temples and altars in radioactive zones. They were ascetics and renounced everything mundane, but at the same time they were not pacifists and could enter into conflicts with those who encroached on the radiation. Particularly ardent cultists even try to spread radiation, and those who prevent them from doing so they call heretics. Despite the fact that the Megaton had just been built, it was already under attack by raiders. Some residents died, but the settlement gave a rebuff. The city passed the first durability test. Before 2241, the new overseer of Vault 101 stops the practice of isolationism, sabotaging the experiment. An expedition to the surface has been prepared. 2241, beginning of February, the gear doors of Vault 101 opened, and the first expedition organized by the new overseer of the vault went to investigate. They find Megaton and established diplomatic and trade relations with it. On February 10th, the expedition returned back to the vault, leaving 2 ambassadors in the city. In 2242, after the destruction of Poseidon Station, John Henry Eden III, who declared himself the new president located in the pre-war empty Raven Rock base, contacts the broken enclave. He orders the enclave on the west coast to retreat to the east. Thus, most of the enclave arrives in the Capital Wasteland, establishing a new cell in Raven Rock. At the same time, Navarro still remains an active base of a small number of enclaves on the west coast, which means that apparently there was a split in the faction and not everyone accepted the order to relocate to the east. In fact, John Henry Eden was a Zax supercomputer who, as Modus in the White Springs bunker, regained self-awareness. He formed his personality based on a mixture of personalities of previous residents, including the late presidents of Enclave, Dick Richardson. Only Colonel Autumn the Senior knew that Eden was not a person, so he essentially shared this management of the faction with him. In reality, Raven Rock should be here in Pennsylvania, but according to the Fallout 3 game map, it is here. But in order to spread the density of settlements a little over the wasteland, the locations of which often in relation to Raven Rock, we will put the complex here, closer to the Appalachian Mountains, on the more northern bend of the river. After 2242, the Enclave takes control of the Adams Air Force Base, the real prototype of which is Andrews Base. There they find a mobile base crawler. The Enclave also takes control of the satellite relay station and the Rockland Road Tunnel. Bradley Hercules satellite flies over the Capital Wasteland, which, like Archimedes 2 over the west coast, has a death ray used by the Enclave. Before 2248, the isolationist settlement of Rockopolis is founded in the western caves of the Wasteland, which is led by King Crag. Also, the Blue Destiny brothel is established. There are two adventurers in the regions, Herbert Dashwood and Ghoul Argyle. Their adventures in the future will be told by 3Dog on Galaxy News Radio. 2248, a couple sought refuge in King Crag of Rockopolis, apparently for some previous services to the settlement provided it to them. Herbert was a ladies' man, and therefore, after the incident with the daughter of King Crag, he and Argyle were kicked out. In 2249, Herbert's favorite brothel, the Blue Destiny, closed after a cholera epidemic. James and Catherine, two scientists, are found in the Project Purity around 2250. They wanted to purify all the radiation-poisoned water in the rivers of the region and make it drinkable. Wandering Harold, the former mayor of Gecko and the mutant from whose head a tree began to grow, comes to the region. Having stopped for rest somewhere in the northern mountains, he realized that he had taken root and could no longer move from his place, in fact finally turning into a living tree. Nevertheless, he himself nourished the surrounding land, as a result of which trees and other vegetation began to grow around. In 2250, Herbert and Argyle were captured by slavers from Paradise Falls, but escaped, saving also another slave, Penelope Chase. They, being pursued by super mutants, find themselves in the hills where the settlement of Rockopolis was hidden. Herbert, trying to make an impression on the lady, begins to brag that he knows where it is and what secret signal he knows for entering. Once in the settlement, they find out that Penelope is actually the leader of the slavers, the Black Widow, and that they have been trying to fight Rockopolis for a long time. Despite a pointed gun at Herbert, Argyle kills Penelope by knocking her down with a kung fu punch and ripping out her heart. But the city of Rockopolis could not be saved. The slavers chasing the travelers had already broken in. They killed all the defenders and captured the rest of the settlement, selling them later to Pete. Argyle was killed, but Herbert escaped unharmed. Hermann Jürgen, a psychopath and cannibal who eats slaves that cannot be sold, becomes the new leader of the slavers. Before 2252, Arefo settlement, the name of which was taken from the Romanian letters on the road sign Careful, is being built on presumably the American Legion Memorial Bridge. Although the settlement was a regular stop for caravans, it was not successful. Within a few years the population drops from 30 to 5 people. In 2252, Colonel Autumn is dying in the Enclave. His son, Colonel Augustus Autumn, inherited his position and knowledge of Eden after his father's death. Being colonel is a family matter. However, he doesn't hesitate to sabotage the orders of the supercomputer, preferring to do what he thinks is right. In 2254, a new expedition of the Brotherhood of Steel is being organized in Lost Hills, the final destination of which was the territory surrounding Washington, abundant in military bases and other military infrastructure. Older Owen Lyons leads the expedition. In 2255, the Alliance expedition passes through the city of Pitt, performing Operation Scourge in it, taking down raiders, mutants and other feral marginals. During the operation, they suffer only one loss, initiate Ishmael Ashur. Taking about 20 healthy children from Pitt with them, the Brotherhood comes to the Capital Wasteland and establishes the Citadel on the ruins of the Pentagon. In the Pentagon labs, they discover Liberty Prime, a giant humanoid military robot that was supposed to wreak havoc with its lasers and massive limbs. Contrary to the official report, Ishmael Ashur didn't die in Pitt. He, having got out from under the rubble left by the Brotherhood, creates his own slave empire, submitting other raiders. He conquered the city and forced slaves to work in a steel mill. Technically, slaves can gain freedom and join raiders themselves if they win gladiatorial battles against other slaves. The city itself, for the most part, consists of two districts: Pitt Downtown, the territory of the factory, and Pitt Uptown, the territory of pre-war skyscrapers, where the raiders live. An outpost is also established on the 10th South Street Bridge. In 2256, Capital Preservation Society of River City extracts the US Constitution from the surviving National Archives building. Before 2257, a small settlement, the Republic, in which only one family lived, encouraged with the theme of statehood, over the years of its existence, managed to change several names along with its leaders, including the Kingdom of Larry, the Republic of Stevie Ray, Bill Sylvania, the New Republic of Stevie Ray, and the Kingdom of Tom. The current ruler, Tom, expels his son Dave from the settlement. Alistair Tenpenny, a man who sailed across the Atlantic from England, founds an elite settlement in honor of himself, the Tenpenny Tower, on the site of a pre-war skyscraper hotel. Only the wealthy inhabitants of the wasteland could live in the settlement, among whom, for example, was Herbert Dashwood, who also became a honorary ghoul of the underworld, although he was not actually a ghoul. Nevertheless, the access of real ghouls to the tower was absolutely restricted. Like any self-respecting Englishman, Alistair loved safaris and shoot creatures and possibly peasants with his sniper rifle from the balcony of his penthouse. In 2257, Jefferson Memorial was chosen by James as a place to install a purification machine in the river, but his group of scientists are constantly being threatened by super-mutants. Then James negotiates with the Brotherhood of Steel, who have put a military garrison to guard the facility. Because of such decisions, discontent is brewing in the Brotherhood camp because Owen, instead of collecting technology, spends the resources of the faction to help the local population. Alistair Tenpenny hires Duke of Zmerks, including Dave, who was exiled from the Republic, to go to the pre-war Fort Constantine and pull something out of there. Having lost part of the group, the mercenaries scatter. Dave, being already a veteran mercenary, returns to Tom's kingdom and arranges a revolution against his father, overthrowing him and creating the Republic of Dave. He is rewriting the law so that he can take a second wife and raise the demographics of his country, to populate and seize the entire wasteland. He creates a new constitution, hosts fictitious elections, creates all sorts of state administrative departments. For example, the Tourism Office, Dave's Activities Bureau, Immigration Bureau, and even an army consisting of 2 people. In addition, he creates a museum of himself and a school where they teach that as a child Dave did not cry and his poop did not smell. Harold Tree was found by a wanderer who was so stunned by what he saw that he created a tribe of tree miners to live in this oasis. His tribe imitated the Druids, abandoning modern technology, using branches and plants in their clothes and bearing the names of trees. They became a tribe of isolationists who merged with nature and protected Harold, calling him the god who grows. Before 2258, the current overseer of Vault 101 died in the wastelands, but many think that he died because of a conspiracy. Alphonse Almodovar, a young and charismatic resident of the Vault, has been chosen as the new overseer. However, he was an isolationist at heart, and therefore, when he came to the power, he forbade leaving the Vault, returning it to the course of experiment being conducted. In 2258, a new settlement has been founded in the region, Canterbury Commons, which has become another important trading center of the wasteland. On July the 13th, James and Catherine have a future protagonist of Vault 3 born at the Jefferson Memorial, referred to in the annals of the history as the Lone Wanderer. However, his birth was overshadowed by the death of Catherine. Moreover, the scientists still could not launch the installation. It did not work. Also, the number of attacks of super mutants on the memorial has increased recently. The Brotherhood is already fighting off several attacks a day, losing knights in battles, which further increases discontent within the organization. As a result, disappointed in everything, James and his newborn son moved to Vault 101, accompanied by a detachment of the Brotherhood of Steel. Owen Lyons orders the Brotherhood to leave the memorial because without James, the installation has lost any value, and that they can no longer hold the defense. Scientists led by Madison Lee, left to defend themselves, are shocked by the betrayal of both James and the Brotherhood, but manage to evacuate to River City. Project Purity disbands. Vault 101 accepted James and the baby on the condition that James would work as a doctor. Meanwhile, he was still dreaming about the project and continued his secret research. One day, being drunk, he broke into the overseer's office and found records about Stanislaus Brown and his development, GEC, in the terminal. He understands that the GEC, which unfortunately was not provided for Vault 101 because the vault was not even supposed to open, is a missing component in his scheme, and to complete the project, it must be found. That concludes our discussion of the Wasteland for today. The failure of the Project Purity and the birth of the protagonist are quite significant events to have them as the time era's dividers. Next time we will touch on the period of the protagonist's adolescence. While he was growing up and eating sugar bombs in the vault in the ignorance of the surrounding world, important changes were taking place in the region. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, subscribe, hit the bell and leave a comment. Also check all the links below. They include the Google Earth map, the log compendium and the text version of this video, which includes the statistics of the settlements and factions. That's all for today. Don't drink radioactive water from rivers, and I'll see you in the Wastelands, Wastelanders. Fishers out.